some of our children who, literally lay in bed until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning waiting for the offender to come into their room, for the abuse to occur. It occurs, and they finally cry themselves to sleep at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they're getting up at 7. Maybe they're getting 3 hours of sleep a night. I don't do well for 3 hours of sleep at night. And if I had to do that night after night after night, why would we be surprised that their school performance significantly changes in regards to what they're capable of doing just because of the situation of the abuse itself? Lack of personal hygiene or care, taking risky behaviors, maybe drinking, smoking, being very sexually promiscuous. It just really depends on the situation, but there's lots of risk behaviors that, again, doing the activities that they're capable of doing or having control over versus having everything else being told or dictated to them of what they're doing. And then the inappropriate sexual behaviors kind of go hand in hand in regards to that. We do see a lot of high-risk situations in sexual choices from our younger children who have had a history of sexual abuse. So certainly something in part of that history that we want to continue to look at. Again, we know that the child abuse itself can be life-changing in nature. It doesn't have to be life-controlling in nature, as long as we have the opportunity for good intervention and support services that can be made available to the children, and that's really where we're focusing in regards to that. I think we'll go ahead and move forward again for purposes of time here. Therapy is really one of the areas that I want to touch really quick on. I think it's extremely important that we recognize the importance of therapy, how that supportive services can help our children be able to deal with their own feelings, to deal with future feelings as they move forward in that healing process. Support groups and certainly counseling from both the child themselves and the non-offending caregivers. That entire realm of support systems is extremely important. Go ahead again. And again, I think that the importance of the total system, the home environment, is really the success in regards to that. A child can be told over and over again, this is not your fault, you didn't deserve for this to happen, etc. But if they go home and they hear the negative comments coming right back to them, it's very difficult for them to have any healing or any closure in regards to that. So changing an environmental system is extremely important in that success of moving forward. Even if it sometimes can be unintentional, like for instance, if we have an older sibling who, if you would have never told about dad abusing us, I would be able to buy a new prom dress. Well, although that may be factual in nature, it's not extraordinarily helpful for the child because they did tell, and they told because it was abuse. It wasn't about the prom dress. But those are the kinds of statements that family therapy can really be supportive in regards of trying to prevent some of those situations that aren't necessarily, we don't think about those negative impacts that can happen down the road. So the church's role, different things that the church can do in regards to protection of children. I think the most important thing is prayer. Prayer for victims, for healing, for hope, for that process of moving through that disclosure and into a new, whatever the new is for that child, and to be able to have future safety in regards to that. I do think that it can be difficult for many churches to find the opportunity for prayer for the offender as well. I do, and I know I will admit my own bias to this, but I think that when we have a family system that's within a church situation where there is abuse that occurs, the church's role is to support the victim and their family member, and the abuser needs to move on to find a new church. To send the message that you're there for the abuser, that's fine, but they're not the ones that stay in the church. They need to move on to a different church. I feel really strong about that. If there were going to be a system of believers as we protect children and protect those that have been abused, and I have seen some very odd and sad things happen in those particular circumstances where offenders are protected and supported, and family members are basically ostracized out of the church, even though they may or may not believe the abuse. But it becomes like this all about the offender thing, and that can be very harmful. from a church perspective. And then talking about prevention, becoming educated, being willing to take that extra step, even though it may not be a comfortable thing for you to do, even though there's other opportunities for you on a Saturday or Sunday evening. Those are important things to be able to become more comfortable in being able to approach the topic of child abuse and have that conversation. So even the prevention education and sex education, I think we oftentimes don't talk about healthy sex within our church. We talk a lot about maybe not having premarital sex and the negative health outcomes of having sexually transmitted diseases and other kinds of negative things, but we don't talk a lot about when is sex good and how should that sex be for adults, and under what circumstances do we expect that to happen. And I think that that's a message that teenagers need as well, to be able to know more just than the don't do's, but the when to do's and how to do's and how to take care of yourself, which again isn't always an easy topic to approach, but can be very healthy coming from the church in the right circumstances. And the reality is, again, that guilt or innocence is so often based off of the likability of whoever's telling us the information. Do we like the kid? Do we like the adult? Do we want to protect the offender? Do we want to protect the victim? And again, how we kind of go back and forth sometimes in regards to that can be also very, very difficult. And then basically, again, just to go back to those, trusting your instincts, learning from your instincts, and trusting the reality piece to identification of abuse. So talking a little more specifically then about the Child Advocacy Center and the services that we provide here in Sedgwick County, we are a multidisciplinary team focus, and that means that all of these folks that are listed on this screen are who our primary partners are. We work with them daily, we interact with them daily, we work all of the cases connected with one another in some form or fashion, and that's intentional because we want to make sure that those gaps that can sometimes happen are filled, that we have a much more streamlined process, and that we're much more coordinated and effective in the services that we're providing to families. One of the things in particular that I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about is that co-location of all of our services within one location. We have purchased the former Lincoln Elementary School building, and actually I think if we move to the next slide, am I right that... Yes, we've purchased the former Lincoln Elementary School building, so on Lincoln between Topeka and Emporia. This would be the third school year that this building has sat empty. We were able to purchase it last October, and we're in the midst of making decisions about renovation and the plans to be able to change that to be able to be a much more child-focused environment. So if we move to the next slide. This would be kind of a site layout of how the building would look on the land. The land itself is about a 4.2 acre piece of land. The building itself is about 42,000 square feet. We will end up moving about 55 people right off the bat into that facility, and that will be including 8 different agencies as we all work together. So we have 6 employees, so that tells you a little bit more about how many other folks we have that will be joining us in regards to the services that we'll be providing. We have everything kind of broken down into different sections so that children and families will come in, their investigative interviews and therapy services and all the different kinds of things that they will receive are on kind of one centralized area of the facility in the building, where the offenders, potential offenders, have a completely separate entrance and address that they'll be responding to, so they won't be commingling with one another, won't be crossing paths with one another. There'll be intentional visual limitations in regards to that, and for obvious reasons, that's a much safer environment for our children to be able to enter into. But the focus of bringing all of those services together is so that families, when they come in, can have all of those services and they're not having to hop between all the different agencies within town. What we oftentimes have seen in the past is that maybe they go to appointment 1, 2, and 3, or 1 and 2, and then they drop off. And so all the other services that are really essential and needed as well don't tend to happen because it's difficult to take that additional time off, to go to that many different places, enter that many more facilities that we don't know who's talking to who and what information you do or don't already have. And it's very intentional to be all in one location where that communication can happen and it be a much more child-friendly environment for them to continue to come back for those ongoing services even after the initial investigative phase. There's a second story to one section of the building that will house a significant amount of our law enforcement and social services, as well as our Internet Crimes Against Children task force as well. So where we kind of sit in regards to the capital campaign, if you picked up one of the brochures that was in the back, the Behind Closed Doors brochure gives you a little bit more information in regards to kind of the overall goal and what we're doing. We have made a lot of progress and we're very excited in regards to that. We sit right now at about 3.9 million, a little bit over that in regards to our total goal of 6.5 million. Our important focus right now is to be able to meet our maybe challenge that we have on the table. Until December 15, we need to raise still around $290,000. So we have a lot of folks that are already asked, and we're waiting to hear back on, and more that we will be asking in the meantime as well. Once we finish that phase of the campaign, then we'll finish out the remainder of the campaign. We anticipate doing some demolition kinds of things early in 2015 with the renovation then starting a couple of months after that in 2015. So we're very excited about the opportunity for us to be able to change that facility into something that is very worthy of being able to use for this proper purpose. We're excited about many of the different partners that we have in regards to this endeavor. One of the large facility areas that we have is the education wing, and that's very intentional for us to be able to provide community education as well as public and general information and peer information. So educating our staff and educating our partners in regards to different topics as well. We were the recipient of a wonderful donation from Junior League of Wichita in regards to us being able to do the renovation for the education center, and we're extraordinarily pleased with that partnership as well. So we have lots and lots of different partners that we're just thrilled to be able to have and to continue to work on this project. So the things that you can do: continue to learn the signs and symptoms, to act when you have concern, to really engage in regards to conversation with your community members about what is a child advocacy center, why is it important, does child abuse really happen in our community, and is it our responsibility to help protect children? Certainly suspecting child abuse when you have it is to being able to move forward with that reason to go ahead and report that as well, to be courageous in regards to that. It does take courage to be able to step up and say, this isn't okay and this isn't going to happen in my community or in my family, and to be willing to make a change in regards to that. So I know that my time is over, so I will invite BK up to come, and then we'll do a question and answer at the very end, correct?
After Lily.
Okay, very good.
See what I did? She's really a special lady. First, you need to know that Diana is a speaker. Lily and I are grandmas who talk. We are not speakers. And sometimes I get lost in the middle and I look at Lily and I say, Lily, where am I? And she'll tell me. So that's kind of the way we do this. We are accustomed to speaking to kids. We have spoken to groups of adults, but basically we just tell them what we do. So tonight we're going to speak to the kids, because this is going to be videoed and hopefully lots of kids see it. You were presented with a paper when you came in, and If there's more out there, if you have a pen, I would like for you to write this little bit of information on that paper. I would like for you to go on the internet and look at traits of a sex offender. That will come out in something Oprah's done. And it tells you the traits of a sex offender. I was going to get you copies, but it has all rights reserved. But you can print off your own. That's not a problem. They've done that. Lily and I both had a tremendous amount of stuff going on this week. So we're just a little bit on the disemboweled side. I had a very good friend that I went to high school with, and she told me, don't ever tell me something's wrong if you can't tell me what I can do about it. And that stuck with me. So we have a lot of positive things to tell you, a lot of positive things that you can do. You kids, since there's so many of you here, you know who we are. I'm Grandma BK, and Grandma Lily will have the doll. We want you to know that one person can make a difference. Because we're two water aerobics grandmas. Nobody's special, that's for sure. But I read in the newspaper, there was a editorial. And the title of it was, Be Vigilant About Protecting Children. Well, I read it because it was a positive headline. People don't tend to read negative headlines. If it says child abuse, they think, well, I can't do anything, so I'm not going to read that. At least that's what I thought. Well, in this editorial, it talked about a little boy who was 18 months old. His name was Vincent Hill. He had not only been abused, he had been tortured. I read that he had a broken collarbone on top of a healing broken collarbone. He had a spiral break to his leg. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know you could have a spiral break. But he did. Somebody did that. He had cuts in his mouth. Someone had stuck him with it before. But when I got to where, and I'm sorry folks, but you need to hear this. When I got to where they had pulled that little boy's fingernails off, I was crying. I was sitting at my kitchen table crying, and I said, why, God? Why did that baby have to suffer like that? And if I had a guardian angel, would you please give it to some child that needs it? And what can I do to help? And I mean, I was upset. An hour later, I'm at peace. And into my mind comes, yard signs. Well, what had happened was the neighbor, Vincent lived in a duplex. The neighbor had heard the baby's cries. And she had called what we had at that time was called SRS. It has since been improved. And at that time, SRS had 4 options. They would respond in 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, or no response at all. Well, in Vincent's case, they chose no response at all. And a month later, he died. He died because he suffocated because they stuck a rag in that baby's throat while they tortured him so the neighbors wouldn't hear him cry. The sheriff, this happened up in North Newton, the sheriff said, had someone called 911, they would have checked on that baby. So an hour later, I'm at peace, and into my mind comes yard signs. And I know it's got to say call 911, but I don't know what else it's got to say. So the next day, I go to pick Lily up for water aerobics, and I show her this piece of paper that I read that made me sick and made her mad. Now, when you get two mad grandmas together, it's amazing what can happen. We prayed on Thursday. We had sample signs on Friday. The newspaper picked up our story on Saturday. The Associated Press picked it up from there. And we were all over the United States in 5 days. The USA Today, the Orlando Sun-Sentinel, the New York Daily News, all the TV stations in Nebraska and all the TV stations in Kansas. 2 water aerobics grandmas. Wasn't because we were special, but it's been very special for us ever since. Since that, we have been led. Our police department came out and said in the paper, if you suspect child abuse, they didn't say you have to prove it. If you suspect it, you call 911 and let us sort it out. Since that time, the reports of child abuse have increased by at least 25%. I hope that child abuse has not increased by that much. I hope it's just the reports that have increased. But it has raised the awareness. We have been asked and led to speak in middle schools. We got in the middle schools by accident under the radar. We didn't know what we were doing. We just thought, well, we'll find out. So I knew somebody that was on the Board of Education, and I saw her somewhere, and I said, do we call so-and-so? She says, oh, no. You call so-and-so and tell them I said to call. So we started at the top. We started with the assistant superintendent of schools, not knowing